How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Memches, Daf 48 of Masechta BavaBasra. Friends, today's a Geschmack Daf. Where are we going to end? Yeah, today we're going to do... Oh, come on. Sorry, Mom. Today we're going to do a whole... I wouldn't say a whole daf, but most of a daf. Tomorrow's going to be a funny daf because we're not going to do very much of it. Instead... in 2 days from now, it's going to be a bigger daf. Yeah, just because it starts kind of a sugya. Yeah. Anyways, but today we're basically going to do a daf. Very, very interesting sugya. Very interesting sugya. Okay, it's a continuation from yesterday. Let's jump in. We're going to start daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis, about 5 lines from the bottom. Amr Rav Huna, says Rav Huna, Tal Yu v'Zovin Zabine. My timer, that's the shaila. Oh, Givaldig. Says Rav Huna that if you hang a fellow, Posha, you hang a fellow, and say, hey, you want to sell me your thing, okay? And he's mamish hanging from a tree. And he says, all right, fine, I'll sell it to you. So it's a valid sale. Meaning he's obviously it's an offer he can't refuse, right? But it's nonetheless a valid sale, right? Amr Rav Huna says, Rav Huna, Tayu v'Zavin, if they hang him, and he then agrees to sell, Zabine, it's a valid sale. My time, how come? Called the Mizabin Inish. Well, because if you think about it, the Gemara wants to argue. The reason is because if you think about it, well, every time you sell anything, technically, right? Where am I? My time called the Mizabin Inish. Ilav the honest love Mizabin. Technically speaking, why would I sell anything? Every time somebody sells something, it's because he needs the money. It's because he's like, what does he say? Because he needs to. So he needs to. If he didn't need to sell it, he wouldn't be selling it. So every time somebody sells something, it's like, he's selling it because he needs to sell it. So here also, it's no different. He's being sort of forced to sell it by somebody else, as opposed to being forced to sell it out of necessity. But every time you sell epis, you're selling it out of some kind of being forced to. That's what the Gemara wants to argue. Again, my time. How come do we say Tayu v'Zavin Zabini? Because Kol the Mizabin Inish. Anything that a person sells, he loved the onisu. If it wasn't because he had to sell it for some reason, have love mizabin, he wouldn't be selling it. And it's obviously a valid sale. So here, it's no different. But it says the Gemara, "V'dil mashayni onzu denafshi onzu da'achrinim." 1 second, maybe there is a difference. Maybe it's different when you make your own decision for yourself. That, hey, I really need to sell this thing, and you decide, it's your own choice to sell it. Here, nobody's asking the original owner, who's now hanging from a tree, it's not his own, it's not really his own choice, we're going to get into it, shtickle now, but like, Lemaisa, somebody's hanging him from a tree. And saying, will you sell it to me? Offer he can't refuse. So again, Dilma Shani owns the nafshi. Maybe it's different when it's like his own sort of predicament that forces him to sell it. Me'on tzedachrin, as opposed to other people imposing a offer that you can't refuse. Elo midatanya. Rather, we learn enough from the following brisa Yakriv also that it says by a korban nedove. That when a person says that he's going to bring a korban, so we force him to bring it. If a fellow says, I'm going to bring a korban, so we force him to bring the korban. Is it possible that he's therefore going to bring a korban against his will? What kind of a korban is a korban that you're forced to bring? It says, right, that I guess we're learning it to mean that he has to want to bring it. Right, that he has to want to bring it. So I don't understand, how do these two things shtim? How do you have, on the one hand, kofin also, on the one hand we're forcing him, and the other hand he has to want to. If you're forcing him, it's not out of his own will. Okay, it's at how so? Kofin also, ani. Well, you basically make him an offer he can't refuse. You force him to offer it, and you hang him from a tree, I guess, and you say, well, yeah, how about now? You want to bring your korban now? And he says, yes, just take me down. I'll bring a korban, right? Rotza ani, I want to bring the korban, right? So we basically twist his arm until he says, okay, I want to do it. So here oichit, right? We hang him from the the mobster hangs him from a tree and says, okay, do you want to sell me it? He says, yeah, I want to sell you it. So in that case it works. But 1 second, maybe it's different by a korban. Because even if we're forcing it out of him to say, yes, I want to bring the korban, at the end of the day, objectively speaking, there's going to be value for him in that, right, he's bringing a korban. He's going to get kapara, atonement. He's going to have, right? He's bringing a korban, a very, very gewaldige thing. So maybe that case is different, right? Meaning, at the end of the day, yeah, sure, we're forcing him, but ultimately he's saying, I want to do a mitzvah. Hang him from a tree and say, will you sell me, Epis? At the end of the day, when he says, I want to what? I want to sell you something? It's not something that sort of objectively will say that, his neshama wants to do. Let's say that. Right. Ultimately, you could say, I want to do a mitzvah. Okay, gevaldik. I want to sell you, Epis, not as gevaldik. Rather from the sefer of the Brisa, we say the zel bezach, we say the same thing by giving a get. That if you have a recalcitrant fellow and he doesn't want to give a get to his wife, so we basically knock him around the shtickle until he says, okay, I want to give the get. So we can knock him around the shtickle until he says, I want to, and when he says I want to, so it means that he wants to. So you hang the guy from the tree, you say, will you sell me your piece of pizza? And he says, all right, I want to do it. So it works. Vidilma shiny awesome. 1 second, maybe a husband saying, yes, I want to give a get is different than a fellow hanging from a tree who says, yes, I want to sell you my pizza. The mitzvah l'shma divrei chachamim, because he's doing a mitzvah by giving a get. The chachamim say you need to give a get to your wife. So meaning in the case where where they want to get divorced, and he refuses. So it's a mitzvah to listen to the chachamim who say divorce your wife. And therefore, when he says Rotza Ani, what his neshama is speaking, his neshama says, I want to listen to the chachamim. But over here, his neshama is not saying, I want to sell you pizza. Ela svaru, rather it's simply logical. We can't learn that from a brisa. It's logical. Who agav onse gomeru makne. What we want to say is that, look, ultimately, when he's hanging from this tree, he's got a choice to make. Either I hang here forever, or I sell the piece of pizza to this fellow who wants it very badly. Ultimately, he says, given these two bad options, my preference would be I want to go with the option to stay alive and forfeit the piece of pizza. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to say that ultimately it's his decision to say, yes, I want to sell you the thing. And therefore we go with that. Okay. Interesting. Alright, fine. That's Rav Huna's opinion. But I think we talk a pasuk that way. Actually, we're going to see that at the bottom of the Amud. Most of Rav Yehuda asks a kasha. Get a ma'usa. If you have a forced get, okay, like we were talking about, right? You knock around the guy a little bit until he says, I want to give a get to my wife. So be Yisrael kosher. If it's a yid who's doing the knocking arounding, so then when he says, okay, I want to do it, and he gives the get, so it's kosher. Be'akum posel. But if it's an akum who's doing the knocking arounding, so then when he says, okay, I want to do it, and he gives it to his wife, right, that doesn't work. It's considered coerced, it doesn't work. Uve akum, but even if an akum is the one doing the knocking arounding, Chovtin also v'omrilo, he can knock him around. That's so boring. Knock him around. But that's, I guess, what you would say in English. So let's go with that. So v'akum chovtin also. So even so, with an akum, we just said he's not allowed to do the knocking arounding. So he would be able to knock around v'omrim lo and say to the recalcitrant fellow, Asay mashi Yisrael omer licha. He can knock him around and say, don't do what I am telling you to do. Do what the Yidden are telling you to do. And then when he says, Rotza ani, I want to, so we assume that in that case he wants to listen to the Chachamim. Ve'amai, why does that work? Hasam nami nemo agavon segomer magarish ua. But if we're going to say that Talyuv is Ovin, Zabini, if we say that you hang a guy from a tree and say, will you sell me Epis? And he says yes, and he sells the thing, it's a valid sale, because ultimately when he says, yes, I want to sell it to you, ultimately, it's his decision. What does it say? Agav own say, Gomer Magash, based on his current predicament, he makes a decision, yes, I want to sell it to you. And we say, okay, so given the circumstance, he wants to sell it. So he says, I want to do it. So if that's the case, then why should it matter by a get who's doing the knocking arounding, whether it's a yid or whether it's an akum? At the end of the day, when things got tough, he made the decision, yes, I want to give a get. It was his decision ultimately, which is what we're saying. So who cares who's doing the knocking arounding? Ultimately, he came to the decision that yes, this is something that I want to do. Ha'itmar Allah. So interestingly, we teach about that you know what? It doesn't technically me'ikar adin. It doesn't technically matter who's knocking arounding. Where am I? Ha'itmar Allah. Amr of Mishashia says of Mishashia, Dvar Torah that me deoraisa. Afilu ba'akum nami kosher. Oh, so says Mishasha taka meikar adin. Even an akum who does the knocking arounding, it's kosher, right? Because ultimately when he says rotza ani, it's his decision. But umatam amru ba'akum pasul. So then why do they say that an akum should not be doing the knocking arounding? Kidei shelo te'ei kol achas v'achas oleches v'tola atzma biad akum v'afkas atzma miad baila. Because this is not something that we want to encourage. We don't want that, right, that the Jewish women whose husbands are being recalcitrant should be going to an akum to do the knocking arounding, and could lead to inappropriate situations. So therefore, technically speaking, if the akum does the knocking arounding, it works. But because we don't want to encourage that the Jewish women are going to the akums for knocking arounding, so therefore we say that it's no good, but really me'ikar adin itaka is good. I think Rashbam had said, and therefore technically speaking, if she then accepted a kiddushin from another fellow, she would have to get a get from both the original husband as well as the new guy, because technically she was divorced from the akum's knocking arounding. Okay. But we say rather let a yid do the knocking arounding, unless the akum says, I'm knocking you around because you need to listen to the yid. Then that we said that would be okay. Moshe Rav Amnune asks a kasha. Lokach mi sikrikon v'chozer v'lokach mi baal abayis. Okay, mekrobatos. So we said yesterday that if the sikrikon stole the field from Shimon the Yid. Okay, the Sikrikon stole the field from Shimon. And then Reuven bought the field from the Sikrikon. And we said, so I'm going to read that again, Lokach mi Sikrikon. So if Reuven bought the field from the Sikrikon, and then Reuven goes back to Shimon and says, hey Shimon, I realize that this was your field. Can I have, is it okay that I have it? Mikrobato. So it doesn't work. Ve'amai, but why not? Assuming that we're talking about assuming that we're talking about that Shimon was makneit to Reuven, so why do we say that doesn't work? Meaning, yeah, it was stolen from him by the Sikrikon. The Sikrikon is a scary guy. Shimon had no other choice other than to relinquish his field. So why are we saying that Reuven can't take it, can't go to Shimon and get it directly from Shimon after he got it from the Sikrikon? Why can't he work it out with Shimon? Even if we say that Shimon was intimidated into selling it, ultimately we're saying at the end of the day, right? Ultimately, it was his decision at the end of the day to sell it. Well, Taka, it was stated that Amar Rav lo shanu ela do Amar lechazek uknei. Well, Rav does clarify that when we say that Reuven can't get it from Shimon, that's only if all Shimon says to Reuven is, yeah, just go make a chazakah. In that case, it doesn't work because Shimon isn't getting anything in return. Let me not say that. In that case, he's not really being mityaches so much, right? He's saying, yeah, okay, fine, yeah, take it. Meaning he's not making any indication that he wants this transaction to go through. He's still shooken up from the Sikrikon. He says, yeah. So Reuven goes to Shimon and says, hey, I got this field in the Sikrikon. Are we cool? He says, yeah, go, just lech chazek uknei, take it, make a chazaka, it's yours. Shimon's probably just still kind of shooken up. Haval b'shtar kono. But says Rav, if, however, Shimon writes a document and says, yeah, here's a document that I'm giving you this field, well then already it would work. Ulishmuel, and according to Shmuel, the Amar af b'shtar nami lo kono ma'ikelim. Okay, but what about according to Shmuel, who says that even if there's a shtar, that's also not enough? Well then, if that's the case, what about agav onsa gomer makne? Well, Mod Shmuel echad zuze, but Shmuel nonetheless would agree though that if he paid Shimon for the field, well then it would be valid. Okay, so okay, Gevaldik. So again, kind of going back to the beginning for a second. This is Rav Huna's opinion. Rav Huna's opinion is Tayu v'zavin zabine. That if you basically give a person an offer he can't refuse, and he says yes, I'll sell it to you, and he sells it and he receives money, so then it is a valid sale. And what about the Sikrikon, where we say that it is not valid? Well, that's only, right, according to Rav, that when we say it's not valid, it's if he says, yeah, sure, you can have it, but he doesn't give according to Rav, as long as Shimon even just gives a document to Reuven, a shtar mechira to Reuven, that would be enough. According to Shmuel, that wouldn't be enough, but if he receives money, that would be enough. So even though there was, an offer that it was an offer that Shimon couldn't refuse, but nonetheless, ultimately, we're saying, agav onse gomer makne, given the situation, he ultimately decided, yes, I'm willing to sell it, and he receives money, and that would be a valid sale. What about Rav Bivi, who then concluded his statement of Rav Nachman that he was talking about yesterday? Karka ein lo ma'oz yeshlo. That Rav Bivi says that no, even the money, even if Shimon accepts money for it, it doesn't work. Right, the Gazlan gets his money back. Right, so then I would say that Talyu v'zavin does not work. So then, even if he paid money, so Michael, so how does Rav Huna answer that? Rav Bivi memro umemro Rav Huna lo svirle. Well, Rav Bivi is an Amor, and Rav Huna is an Amor. And Rav Huna disagrees with Rav Bivi. Rav Bivi wasn't quoting a brisa; he was quoting a statement from another Amora. So Rav Bivi was quoting a statement. Rav Huna disagrees with that statement, so he disagrees with Rav Bivi. So Rav Bivi would say that Tayu v'zavin ein zabine, whereas Rav Huna would say Tayu v'zavin zabine. All my Rave, says Rave, Hilchasa, the halacha is Tayu v'zavin zabine. That if you give somebody an offer, make somebody an offer he can't refuse, and he ultimately agrees to sell, so then it is a valid sale. Now, v'la'amar and ela bisade stam, But now the Gemara is going to clarify. We're going to get to some, I don't know if I should say clarify, because we're going to get to some double negatives. It gets a little bit confusing, but I will try to keep it as positive as possible. Notice I haven't been complaining as much, or how can I make that in a positive way? Notice that I've been not complaining as much, because ever since we learned that Gemara of Almanaskin Inchil Yoshua Yisrael Asaretz, that we have to be chilled out. I've been a lot more chilled out. Where am I? So when we say that Tayu v'Zaven Zabine Zabine, so that is Bisad Stam, we want to say. That is, if, let's say, Shimon owns the fields, right? So Reuven goes to Shimon, and he says, all right, I'm Reuven, the mobster, and you're Shimon, the person who's being extorted. And he says, give me a field. And Shimon does a calculation. He says, all right, I got a bunch of fields. And he says, all right, fine, this one, I'm willing to part with that one. And he says, okay, Reuven, the mobster, you can have this field. So in that case it works, because ultimately he made a cheshbon, he decided, he said, this is the field I'm willing to part with. Haval b'sad zo, lo. But if Reuven, the mobster, comes to Shimon, the victim, and he says, Shimon, I want this field, and Shimon, it's an offer he can't refuse. Shimon has no choice but to give it to him. So then, in that case, even if Reuven, the mobster, paid Shimon, it would not be a valid sale. Uvesad zo. And even when we're talking about Reuven the mobster says, I want this particular field. So we just said that it is not a valid sale. But it's only not a valid sale. Nami lo amarin ela delo artzi zuze. Artzi I think means to count, right? Yeah. Delo artzi zuze. Aval artzi zuze lo. When we say that if Reuven the mobster says, give me this field, and Shimon acquiesces, so we say that it is not a valid sale. Well, we have to see what happened when Shimon received the money. If when Shimon received the money, he counted it and made sure that he received what he was meant to receive, so then it's actually a valid sale. Right? Okay, Seder, Reuven the mobster comes, says, I'm taking your field, gives a Shimon offer he can't refuse. Shimon acquiesces. Reuven gives him the money, he counts it up, makes sure he has what it is, then okay, in that case, Taka, it would be a valid sale. But if Reuven, the mobster, gives him money and Shimon doesn't even look at it, he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Clearly he's distraught, he really didn't want to sell this field. He was an offer he couldn't refuse. Reuven gave him the money. Shimon didn't even count it. He's like, all right, fine, bye. So then, in that case, it would not be a valid sale. Okay, if he counts the sale, then it would be valid. If he counts the money, it would be valid. And when we say that if Reuven the mobster comes and says, I want this field, and then he takes it from Shimon and he gives Shimon money, and Shimon doesn't even count the money, still, the question is, was there a way out of it? Was there a loophole? Could Shimon have kind of saved the field? If there was a way to save the field, well, then we say it's a valid sale. If there was no way to save the field, so if Reuven the mobster comes and says, I'm taking this field, he gives Shimon an offer he can't refuse. He then pays Shimon for the field. Shimon doesn't bother counting it, and he was completely stuck. There was no way out. There was nowhere. Shimon, it was an offer he can't refuse. Shimon, there was no chance that Shimon was holding on to this field. So in that case, he receives the money, he doesn't count it, there's no way out of it. This particular field, he's completely stuck. So in that case, it's not a valid sale. But if there was a way out and he didn't take the way out, well then it is a valid sale. Meaning, if there's no way out, then it's not a valid sale. Double negative. But meaning, if there is a way out, then it is a valid sale. Okay, basically, the only time when it would not be a valid sale is if Reuven the mobster comes and says, I'm taking this field, and then he then pays Shimon. Shimon doesn't even look to see that he's paid in full, and there was no way out of this predicament. In that case, it's not a valid sale. Okay, fine. Where am I? V'hilchasa, however, the halacha is bechulu davu zabine, that actually, no, tayu v'zavin zabine, regardless of if he counted the money, didn't count the money, had a way out, didn't have the way out, this field, many fields. Even in this field, how come? If a fellow is makadosh a fellow, how does that make you feel? Pretty good, right? So when a fellow is Mekadesh a fella, right? So he's Mekadesh her specifically, right? And let's say he forces her. Let's say he forces her to be Mekadesh, to be Mekudeshes. V'amar Meimar, a Meimar says, Tayu of Kodesh, Kiddush of Kiddushin. And a Meimar says that would be valid Kiddushin, even if he forced her to receive the Kiddushin. So therefore we want to say that Tayu of Izavin, Zabine, even if it's this specific field, because Meimar says that by Kiddushin, even if a person, a fellow gives a fellow an offer she can't refuse, and she accepts it, it would be valid Kiddushin. Mar BavaBasra Omar, however, Mar BavaBasra disagrees. He says, no, Be'isha, Vada Kiddushav lo havu. No, by Kiddushin, if a fellow gives a fellow an offer she can't refuse to receive the Kiddushin, obviously it's not valid Kiddushin. He's being inappropriate and giving this fella an offer she can't refuse. Therefore, we act sort of not in the letter of the law with him. That even though Mida Oraisa, the Kiddushin would be valid if she accepts it, but the rabbis eradicated, uprooted the Kiddushin, and therefore it is not valid Kiddushin. Okay, so I understand if we're talking about if he was Mekadesh Bekesef, right? As of course we know from Masech the Kiddushin, Aisha Niknes B'shalosh Drachim Bekesef B'shtar B'biyah. So if he's Mekadesh Bekesef, so I understand Hefker Bezdin Hefker, and they could say that it's not valid. This is not Kesef Kiddushin. But Kadosh B'biyah, Ma'ikal, what if he's Mekadesh B'biyah? So then wouldn't she be Mikudeshes even if it was Baal Korcha? So Omar Le Shavyu Rabban Lebilaso Beilas Znus. So it says Rav Ashi that the rabbis would be considered to be Bilas Nus and not Bilas Kiddushin, and therefore the example from Kiddushin is not a valid Kiddushin because a fellow cannot be Mekadesh a fellow against her will, ultimately. Givaldig. Okay, wow. So that was Daf Memches. We're going to stop here. Tomorrow's Daf is going to be super short, but 2 days Daf from now is probably going to be pretty long. But anyways, today we basically discussed the sugya. I guess you could say it's machlokas Rav Huna and Rav Bivi. Rav Huna says Talyu v'zovin zabine, that even if a person is forced to sell something, if he ultimately sells it, we say agav onse gomer umakne, that ultimately, given the predicament, he made the decision that yes, I want to sell this, and we'd say it's a valid sale. Rav Bivi disagreed and said that it would not be a valid sale. But all right, that was Daf Memches of Masechta BavaBasra. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.